Vincent Trocheck comes through in the clutch as the Rangers win in overtime and take a 2-0 series lead on the Carolina Hurricanes. We discuss the two overtime periods, Trocheck's importance to the Rangers, and all the fisticuffs in a wild game too.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1063 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, where do I begin? Just a wild overtime, double overtime game between the Rangers and Canes. We get about 90 minutes of hockey being played between the two teams, back and forth all the way. I think Vincent Trocheck was on the ice for about half of that, and we're going to talk about everything he did in this game and his importance to this Ranger team and why he's now a steal at the price tag that he's at for the New York Rangers. But yeah, I mean, something I wrote into my notes, and I'll share it with you guys right now. I can share it because the Rangers ended up winning this game. But obviously, you go into the second intermission, Rangers are down by a goal at that point in the game, down 3-2. And I wrote into my notes, we've got them right where we want them, because the Rangers, as we know, have been a big-time clutch team all season. When they are down in a game, there's no panic in their game. They don't start, playing undisciplined hockey or trying to force things or pressing too much. Look, you got 20 minutes ahead of you. You need one goal. I mean, that's kind of an oversimplification, but that's a situation that you're looking at going into the third period. And when I say that the Rangers, have the Canes right where they want them, it's not like an arrogance or anything like that. It's just that's my confidence in this team. And that's how I feel after watching this team for 82 regular season games and now 6 playoff games. This team is at its best when all the chips are down, when everything is on the line, and when they're in a tight competitive game in the third period or in overtime or apparently in double overtime. That's when the Rangers are at their best. This is not blind faith. It's not blind optimism. It is me watching this team all season long. And I think, a lot of you guys would probably agree with that again, this team is at its best when it needs to be at its best. And of course, the Rangers do tie the game in the third period. Ends up going into overtime. Kreider with the game-tying goal, by the way. So props to him for coming through in a big spot there, stuffing it in from the crease. But I do want to break down this overtime winner because there was so much happening on this play. And obviously, Vincent Trocheck is going to get all the headlines and everything. But just about every single player on the ice contributed to make this happen after the entire team contributed in the overtime and in the double overtime to, have the Rangers keep playing and obviously not give up a goal and create some scoring chances. And then, of course, Trocheck finishes it off here. Even Jonathan Quick, in one way, a roundabout way, contributed to this double overtime win, and he was on the bench for the entire game. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. I think some of you probably know what I'm talking about, but some of you might have missed it. We'll get to that a little bit later. But this overtime winner, Rangers get to the power play in the double overtime. They're 1 for 6 on the night coming in. By the way, the Rangers once again win the special teams battle, which we said was going to be absolutely huge coming into the series. They've now done it 2 games in a row. And of course, they've won both of those games. But you got Vincent Trocheck winning a faceoff. Now, he struggled a little bit on the faceoff circle. And again, we're going to talk about Trocheck in greater detail a little bit later. Got a little bit of help from Panarin. Rangers initially had the puck. Canes cleared it. The Rangers got it back in. The Canes cleared it again. So not a great start to this power play, but the Canes do have a great kill. And then you've got Igor Shuriken. This kind of went under the radar. Like, not a whole lot of people were really talking about this after the game, and I get it, because the double overtime game, a million things happened. Even on this play, it felt like a million things happened. But Igor Shuriken, great pass up the ice, up the left side to Mika Zibanejad in the neutral zone. You get Mika gaining the blue line. Mika, again, something else that I think was a little bit under the radar here. Mika, was a bull on this play. He kind of put his head down and forced his way up the boards there, and he's in a tight spot. He's got 2 defenders near him, pressuring him. And obviously, he hung in there, really for as long as he could. He did get knocked off the puck very briefly, but continued to pressure the Kane player that had the puck. And then you've got Kreider swooping into the play. Now, Kreider occasionally will come under fire from Ranger fans. We know this, that there's times where it feels like he's not busting it, doesn't have that fifth gear. We've all been there. Chris Kreider's been a Ranger for a long time. We've all had that moment where we say to our TV, come on, Kreider. One of those plays, nobody can say anything here. I don't want to hear it. Chris Kreider busted it on this play. Looked like he was shot out of a cannon, got in there to apply some pressure, and actually comes away with the puck. He centers it to Artemi Panarin. Panarin takes a shot that is blocked, and it deflects into the corner. And a great high hockey IQ by Mika Zibanejad here, because the puck basically came right to him. So he's fortunate in that respect, I suppose. But Freddie Anderson was awesome in this game. Obviously, Igor was too. And Mika didn't hesitate. There was just that split second where Anderson was having to move from his left to his right. And Mika, I think, saw that and just kind of anticipated that. And maybe figured that Anderson and the Canes in general weren't anticipating him to shoot from this spot on the ice and to shoot so quickly. But that's what he did. Puck's kind of bouncing around. It falls to the feet of Trocheck. Trocheck stuffs it in from the doorstep. And we all go crazy. And the Rangers win. You get the goal song. Just awesome stuff. A great scene at Madison Square Garden. Rangers with the 4-3 win. And man, Vincent Trocheck is a hell of a player. And like I said, we're going to talk about him a little bit later in today's episode in more detail. But, there were some people kind of when they signed him, I don't know, that's a lot of money and we don't have any cap space. And those are all valid concerns and everything. But at $5.625 million a season, Vincent Trocheck is an absolute freaking steal for this New York Ranger hockey team. And he's shown it all year, and he showed it even more in the playoffs. One thing that I loved, because I watched this play a couple of times, I'm sure a lot of you guys did as well, the overtime winner. You could see, you get the big hug and everybody's in a huddle for the Rangers and guys, high-fiving. You could see Ryan Lindgren went over to Igor Shuriken and he said, "Great bleeping game." Now, he did not say bleeping, but I like my job here, so I'll let you guys go ahead and fill in the blanks there. But, while we're talking about the overtime period, we also have to talk about Igor Shuriken. He was phenomenal on this night. I mean, again, I've talked about this in the past. I have run out of adjectives to describe what Igor Shuriken does for this team. And again, just kind of reestablishing the fact that not only is he one of the best goalies in the league, he is one of the top clutch goalies in the league. He makes the big saves when it really counts, including in the overtime and the double overtime of this game. Just a couple of plays where, you're thinking the game might be over. The Canes might be about to get the game winner, and you're nervous, and you might say a word that I can't repeat on this podcast again. But, the first overtime period, Igor made a really nice right pad save on Aho. Aho was able to use his speed to get by everybody. Igor moving left to right. Aho, it looked like might have been trying to open him up to go 5-hole. Was not able to do so, though. Igor, stayed with him all the way, made the right pad save, and we got a play stoppage soon after that. The net actually came off the moorings. And then, also in the first overtime, Igor, just an unreal save. Basically, the puck came in front of the Ranger net. Gensel kind of, forced his way out from behind the net in front, and then kind of left the puck there for Aho. And once again, a right pad save by Igor and a cover. You get big Igor chance in Madison Square Garden after this one. Obviously, the crowd is fired up, and rightfully so. And then I thought this was maybe his best save of the night, and if nothing else, his most clutch save, because it happened in the second overtime period. Kind of a loose puck that goes to Aho. This is while the Canes are on the power play. They got a couple of power play chances in the overtime periods. Rangers were able to kill both of them off. And we've talked about how, when your team's down in a playoff game, it feels like the clock is in warp speed. And when your team is up in overtime, or just in a playoff game in general, it feels like that clock is just crawling. And that goes double when you're trying to kill off a penalty in an overtime period. And the Rangers had to do that twice. That clock would not move. It's only 2 minutes. Feels like the longest 2 minutes of your life. And we're not even the ones playing. The Rangers are out there doing their thing and killing off these penalties. But during this power play for the Canes, there's a loose puck that comes to Aho, and he's in a great spot to shoot there. He's kind of like on the edge of the right faceoff circle, and he's got some opening in front of him. And Igor, a great job, a good aggressive play. He comes out really high in his crease, obviously to try to cut down Aho's options. And Igor catches the puck clean, right in the midsection, basically. I think Aho maybe would have wanted that one back because, he did shoot it right into Igor. But regardless, a phenomenal save by Igor Shuriken there, challenging a really good player, coming out at the top of his crease and making a clutch save and a big save when obviously the Rangers needed to have it. And one other thing I want to say in regards to the overtime period, because, there's been some debate about the Ranger lineup and man, is the NHL, we talked about it on here, is the NHL going to essentially force the Rangers into making Matt Rempe a healthy scratch by continuing to call him for penalty after penalty after penalty, whether it's deserved or not? I think this game right here shows you why it's completely fine and honestly preferable to have Matt Rempe in the lineup. Now, he only got, for a game that went into double overtime, about 90 minutes, I think just shy of that. I want to say there was like 12 something left in the second overtime when the Rangers scored. But regardless, about 90 minutes, give or take, in either direction. Matt Rempe in this game, despite such a long game, only got 4 minutes and 3 seconds of ice time. But it wasn't to the detriment of the Rangers at all. Rempe, I don't think was on the ice at all in the third period. If he did, it maybe just like one shift early. He definitely was not out there for either of the overtime periods. But the Rangers, despite not having one of their forwards, they're still rotating 11 different guys at the forward position in the third period, in overtime, in double overtime. So, Goodrow and Vesey, obviously they're the other two fourth liners. They were both getting some ice time. They were getting some shifts in those situations. Now, obviously, they're not going to be out there as much as like Panarin or Trocheck. We understand that. But the Rangers, they're going with 11 forwards. The Canes during the overtime period, and I'm just going off the announcers. I wasn't really paying as much attention to who's on the ice for them as obviously I am for the Rangers. But apparently, the Canes were only going with 9 forwards in the 2 overtime periods. Their fourth line was essentially glued to the bench. And so the Rangers had the edge there in terms of, forwards that they feel good putting on the ice in a situation like that. And you look at the other 11 Ranger forwards and, you're in overtime, you're in a double overtime. I'm cool with any of those 11 players being on the ice. And again, there's certain guys you want out there more than others. I think that goes without saying. But of the other Ranger 11 forwards, can you point to any of them and think like, oh man, I'm nervous with him on the ice in overtime. I'm nervous with him on the ice in double overtime. I don't think that player exists. All those guys bring something to the table. It's a very deep team, and there's nobody there that I feel like should be glued to the bench, except for Rempe. And it's nothing against Rempe. He does a great job. He plays his role to a T for this team. But I just don't think the Rangers are ready to throw him out there in an overtime playoff game, a double overtime playoff game, or late in the third period, up a goal, down a goal, tied, whatever it might be. And that's completely fine because you got 11 other forwards that you feel good about and you can throw on the ice in any of those situations. So that should put any talk of scratching Rempe to bed. I think he needs to be out there night in and night out. Again, he has a very specific role for this team, but he plays it to a T. And, again, they've got 11 other guys they can go to in tight games, late or in overtime. So we're going to keep everything rolling into the second here. I want to shift our attention to the man of the hour, Vincent Trocheck. Obviously, he got the game-winning goal, but it goes so far beyond that and everything he means to this Ranger team. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, we definitely would like to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and even easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is also brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed. And that's the hiring platform you need to build your team. When you're hiring, you quite simply need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. We streamline hiring with powerful tools that help you find excellent match candidates. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. need to hire, you need indeed. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. Obviously, feeling good today. You know, I think Ranger fans are feeling good about where this team is, and the playoffs couldn't have started much better. I mean, look, these are two competitive games with the Canes, but I mean, you expect that. Canes are a great team. The Rangers have found a way to post a pair of 1-goal wins and now lead the series 2-0. And for the everydayers, in our next episode, going to be talking a little bit more about game 2. I mean, we can't contain this to just one episode. This game was just unreal. So many things happening, and perhaps nothing more important than Vincent Trocheck. Obviously, the game winner. We already covered that. I would just like to point out the fact, though, that on the overtime game winner, the reason that the Rangers were on the power play in the first place was indeed because of Vincent Trocheck. He was the guy that drew the penalty against former Ranger Brady Shea. Trocheck is so slippery when he's got the puck. You know, you think of Trocheck as like kind of a gritty player, and certainly he is, despite not being obviously the biggest guy on the ice. But I mean, there's such a quickness that he's a fast player. He's got great straight line speed, and he can cut on a dime. And that's kind of what he did here. He was maneuvering at the Canes blue line, just inside the blue line, trying to get toward the center of the ice. And, you know, Shea's got his hands full, and he's got to trip Trocheck down to the ice. And the penalty was called. Rangers went to the power play, and obviously they converted. I just want to kind of go back in time here. This is something that I've mentioned on the podcast in the past, but, you know, obviously got some new listeners here. It's the playoffs. Everybody's excited. Something I got to bring up again, because the importance of this is just off the charts for this Ranger team. So a couple of years ago, Rangers are fresh off that big run to the Eastern Conference Final. We had a blast watching that team. They vastly exceeded expectations in every single possible way that season. Most people didn't even have them making the playoffs. I thought they'd get in, but I don't know. I didn't see them going to the Eastern Conference Final that year. Anything is possible once you get into the playoffs, and obviously the Rangers had a great run. But they go into the offseason that year, and there's a decision to be made here, because Ryan Strome is an impending UFA. So too is Andrew Kopp. They were obviously both members of that team, and both had a hand in helping the Rangers go as far as they did that season. Vincent Trocheck is also a free agent. So there's 3 centers out there. I think all 3 of them, in one way or another, had at least some interest in being with the Rangers the upcoming season. Realistically, though, there's no way the Rangers could afford more than one of the 3 players. And all 3 of those guys got similar contracts in terms of the average annual value of the contract. But I mean, there's no comparison here. There's not even a conversation to be had. Nothing against Ryan Strome, nothing against Andrew Kopp. Like both players when they were here. Obviously, again, they both had a hand in helping the Rangers make it as far as they did a couple of years ago. But my God, Vincent Trocheck is just levels above both of these guys. And that's a tough decision that had to be made there. The Rangers very clearly made the right decision. And again, there were some fans that, you know, Vincent Trocheck gets signed, and you think like, oh, you know, that's a lot of money in 7 years. I mean, that's a long-term deal for Trocheck. He's going to be older when that contract runs out. And look, those concerns, they're not completely unfounded or unwarranted. We know how difficult it is to manage the salary cap in this league. But I love the signing when it happened. And even as somebody that really liked the signing, I was vastly underrating Vincent Trocheck and his all-around game and everything that he brings to the table for whichever hockey team he happens to be playing for. I used to say, and I think I said this, I might have said this the day that the Rangers signed Vincent Trocheck in free agency. I used to say he was a B+ at everything. Let me go ahead. I would like to personally and humbly apologize to Vincent Trocheck for what I thought was a compliment was actually an insult. This guy is so much more than that. He excels at every single area of the game. He's an absolute workhorse out there. It's funny because, you know, workhorse is a term that, like, I feel like it's not really a hockey term. You know, you hear it in football a little bit to maybe describe a running back, or, you know, baseball, if there's a starting pitcher that tends to pitch really deep into games, goes 7 or 8 innings every single night, then he's a workhorse. It's not really a hockey term. Vincent Trocheck is an absolute workhorse for this team. He was out there for 35 minutes and 21 seconds in this game. That was about 4 minutes more than any other Ranger forward had, and that's impressive in its own right. Trocheck, on special teams alone, was on the ice for 11 minutes and 25 seconds. So he's obviously out there putting in work, and somebody who, again, just does it all. And I mentioned a second ago, you think Trocheck and you think, you know, the grittiness, right? And that's there, but he's also got just tremendous skill to his game as well. The speed is off the charts for Vincent Trocheck. He's low-key one of the faster Rangers on the team. As far as the forwards go, I'd probably put Kreider in front of him. Kreider's always, he's in the middle of those, fastest skater competitions. I don't remember if he was part of that this year. It doesn't really matter. But Kreider's obviously very fast. And, Jack Roslovic, obviously they bring him in and he adds a speed aspect as well. And his speed was on display in this game. Roslovic's playing very, very well for this team. That's great to see as well. Because I think a couple of us were a little bit down on him, early in his Rangers tenure, but he's been great. But yeah, obviously, Trocheck brings the speed. He'll go in and he'll do some of the dirty work. His zone entries are so good. I mean, there's times where, he's coming up the ice and, he gains the red line. So you think you see the Canes kind of, they're lining up at the blue line there. And I don't know that Trocheck's going to be able to get by all these guys. And then he does. He makes a really quick move at the blue line, stick handles, goes right around somebody. There were a couple times in this game where it looked like there was nothing there, and Trocheck just slips by everybody and gets to the net and gets a scoring chance out of it. So Trocheck, man, I mean, this guy just puts on his hard hat, goes to work every single night. You can't say enough about his importance to this team. What an awesome free agent signing that was. I mean, honestly, it's going to depend on what happens the rest of the way this season. And the Rangers are not done with the Canes, not done by a long shot. It's 2-0, and that's awesome. Canes are a great team. Game 3 is going to be an absolute battle, just like the first 2 were. So we got a long way to go here. Trust me, the Rangers have a long way to go here. But depending on how far this goes and depending on if the Rangers can be the last team standing this year, I mean, you're going to be talking about Vincent Trocheck as one of the greatest Ranger free agent signings of all time. I don't think that's hyperbole to say that. Obviously, there's others you can throw out there. I mean, his line mate, Artemi Panarin, that was a pretty nice signing, was it not? But Vincent Trocheck, I mean, again, awesome signing. And I think for that price that he's at, you can now call Vincent Trocheck an absolute steal for this New York Ranger team. Now, will he be a little bit older in the final 2 years of this 7-year deal? Sure. Do I care about that right now? Not in the slightest. And honestly, Trocheck, watching him play, he'll find a way. I mean, maybe he won't be at the same level then that he is now, but he'll find a way to still be an effective player at that time. And I don't think it's a contract that's going to age particularly bad or anything along those lines. But again, that's a conversation for a whole different day. And Trocheck was obviously interviewed after the game was over. And I just wanted to talk about this a little bit here. He mentioned during the intermission between the 2 overtime periods that the guy that stood up and talked in the locker room and encouraged his team was Jonathan Quick. He said that Quick was the most vocal Ranger between the 2 overtime periods, just encouraging his team to stick with it and keep going and keep battling. And man, you hear stuff like that and it's just the coolest thing ever. Like, I hear that and I say, tack another year on a Jonathan Quick's contract. Obviously, we saw him sign the 1-year extension in the middle of this season. That's awesome. Well-deserved. He gets a little bit of a pay bump and good on him for getting that. And I know he's older now. He's 38. I don't care. You know what? Put another year on Jonathan Quick's contract. He can stay here as long as he wants. Just somebody that, we heard about stories in Vegas last year when he was the backup, how important he was to that locker room. I think it's been very similar in the Ranger locker room as well. I think he's been like a great big brother type to Igor Shuriken, and obviously not shy about speaking up during the overtime intermission there. And just a heck of a player, heck of a goalie. It's been great to see him kind of reinvent himself. But that was cool hearing that from Trocheck, getting a little bit of insight as far as what was going on in the Ranger locker room. And one other thing that I'll mention about Trocheck, tough night on the faceoff circle. He only went 13-21. I'm willing to go ahead and write that off as a little bit of a fluke. It's one of those things where, I've called him a cheat code when it comes to faceoffs, and he is that. But I suppose, anybody can have an off night there. But one thing I'll mention here, something that I love about this, Trocheck, tough night on the dot. 2 Ranger centers picked him up in a big way in this game. Mika Zibanejad went 16-9 on the faceoff circle, and he won some big faceoffs in this game for the Rangers. And Alex Wenberg, who not really known as a great faceoff guy, I think his career percentage is around like 45 or 46%, somewhere in there. He went 9-7 in this game against some good faceoff men from the Carolina Hurricanes. So still more than half for Alex Wenberg. And the Rangers on the dot, a rare loss for the night in general. They won 46.8% of their faceoffs. And obviously, Trocheck had a tough night there, but you know what? They found a way to get it done anyway. And that has been a strength of this team. Trocheck's been a big part of that as well. So good stuff there. Nice to see the other centers picking up Trocheck on a night where, he didn't have his A game on the faceoff circle, but he had his A game in every other aspect of the game. And again, just a phenomenal signing by the Rangers, and just awesome seeing him do his thing in the playoffs. One of the best players for the Rangers through 6 playoff games for sure. So we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. We're going to talk a little bit about the fisticuffs and all the nastiness that ensued during this game. We will get to that in just a second. But first, definitely want to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes that you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers. You can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machines. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local experts are picking for every NFL franchise with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so let's go and keep everything rolling here. I want to talk about just the nastiness in this game. Obviously, the temperature tends to rise. I think in general, and we've talked about this before, the nastiest games of a playoff series tend to be games 2 and 3. Game 1, a little bit of a feeling out process, and okay, how's this going to go kind of a thing. Game 2, obviously, is going to be very important because it's either 2-0 or 1-1 at the end of the night. And then game 3 kind of carries over. And then after that, the focus is on hockey because you can't take a bad penalty, trying to get your pound of flesh and put your team in a bad spot once it gets later in the series. So, this one got nasty, no exception to that rule. It kind of started, I think, the fuse is kind of lit when Svechnikov tripped Igor behind the Ranger net. One of those accidentally on purpose kind of plays. Svechnikov is going by, obviously skate on skate, and Svechnikov's stick is between the legs of Igor Shuriken. Looked for sure like he did it on purpose. Penalty was called. You had Mika Zibanejad going after Svechnikov after the play, and they actually reviewed this to see if it should be a 5-minute major. Now, the case, I guess, could be made. I'll be completely honest here, though. I try to be as unbiased as possible on here. When I watched the replay of this, I didn't see something that screamed 5-minute major. I didn't like the play at all. And again, Svechnikov, it's a classic accidentally on purpose kind of play. Like, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Yeah, you did. You knew what you were doing. You tripped our goalie. You took a shot at our goalie. But watching the replay, it just doesn't jump off the screen. If I take the Rangers and the Canes out of the equation here, it's just generic hockey team A against generic hockey team B. And I watch this play. I don't think I'm going to come away from this thinking that it should be a 5-minute major. You might feel otherwise. Completely respect that as well. Was curious to see how it would go because obviously Svechnikov is an important player. And if he gets booted from this game, that obviously impacts the game in a positive way, you would think, for the Rangers because they're losing one of their best players. But they want the 2-minute minor, and that's the way it stayed after they reviewed it. We also had an incident between Tony DAngelo and K'Andre Miller. Now, of course, DAngelo getting booed every time he touches the puck, and that will continue for the rest of DAngelo's career until the time he decides to hang up his skate or until the time that he simply runs out of chances in the NHL. But the two of them were barking at each other. DAngelo's on the ice, Miller's on the bench, and DAngelo is telling Miller, "I'll fight you anytime." And man, all I know is K'Andre Miller is 1-0. He won via TKO against, John Marino for the Devils. And I mean, hey, if DAngelo wants to step to Miller, it's his decision. He might want to have a little chat with John Marino before that because K'Andre Miller, that was his first career fight. Of course, we had that 5v5 fight at the beginning of the Rangers and Devils game. Matt Rempe was right in the middle of everything there. And, Miller won his fight decisively on that night. And he had Marino down and he had his fist back and decided to lay off once he had Marino down on the ice. But that did not go very well for John Marino. So K'Andre Miller is 1-0. Now, would he beat Tony DAngelo in a fight? Hard to say for sure. I mean, there's only one way to find out, right? That's if both of them drop the gloves. But, as much as Ranger fans would like to see this, would like to see Miller fight DAngelo, would like to see anybody on the Rangers fight DAngelo. And, obviously DAngelo, not a player that Ranger fans are particularly fond of at this time. you got to be smart here. There's no real reason to do it. I mean, look, a fight could break out in game 3. Maybe this is the fight. Maybe Rempe fights somebody. Maybe Barclay Goodrow's in the middle of a fight. We will see. But right now, everything is coming up Ranger. The Rangers are up 2-0 in this series, excuse me. And when you watch these games, the Rangers are being more disciplined than the Canes. The Canes are the ones that are getting frustrated. They're letting their emotions get the best of them. They're taking bad penalties. They're nullifying their own power plays by taking stupid penalties. We saw that at the end of game 1. Svechnikov did it twice. He did it at the end of game 1. He did it in game 2 here as well. And we saw Jake Guentzel basically sucker punch Adam Fox and nullify a power play for the Canes. More on that in just a second. But to continue to kind of go through everything that happened here. So I did want to mention the refs obviously have their hands full in this series. And refereeing is not an easy job. I'd like to acknowledge that, obviously. And I got to say, Kelly Sutherland was one of the refs in this game, and he comes under fire from Ranger fans and just pretty much every hockey fan, from time to time, because he's a ref that I think at times leaves something to be desired. I thought overall in this game, the refs did a pretty good job. They called penalties that were penalties. They weren't calling things that were really ticky-tack, and they stayed consistent. If there's a penalty at the end of the third period, which there was, they're calling it. If there's penalties in overtime, they're calling it. They did it all throughout the night. There wasn't an egregious, call that wasn't a penalty or something that was a penalty that wasn't called, except maybe for this one. And it happened in the first period. This is right after the Canes scored a goal to tie the game at 1 goal apiece. There's a stoppage in front of the Canes net. Now, to be fair, Rempe's in the crease. He made the slightest contact ever with Anderson. Just a little shoulder to shoulder. I wouldn't even call it a bump. They basically graze, and Drury, and players are going to protect their goalie, and I get that. But Drury, at that point, comes up and shoves Rempe about as hard as he could and knocks Rempe down to the ice. And then we get a skirmish. Nothing called on the play. And you've got Sutherland lecturing Rempe after this happens here, despite him being the one knocked down to the ice after the play was over. And despite Sutherland apparently, unless the cameras missed it, not having anything to say to Svechnikov after Svechnikov took out Igor Shuriken. I'll go out on a limb here and say there was slightly more contact from Svechnikov to Igor than there was from Rempe to Anderson. I don't think that's much of a stretch there. I think that's a fact that everybody can agree on. But yeah, obviously, other than that, I thought the refs overall did a pretty good job. The only thing I'll say about this, honestly, I'm okay with this not being called a penalty, what Drury did to Rempe here. The reason, though, that I'm kind of not okay with it, picture Matt Rempe doing this to Drury or really any other player on the Carolina Hurricanes. Picture a stoppage in front of Igor and Rempe shoves somebody about as hard as he can and knocks him to the ice. Do you think there's a chance in blue hell that the referees are not going to call Rempe for roughing in a situation like that? There's no chance. There's no way. We've seen evidence of it throughout this entire playoffs here. So honestly, that was the only issue that I had with the referees pretty much the entire night. Overall, I thought they did a nice job. And again, the one thing I'll say that, I think a lot of people don't say very often, it's not an easy job. This is not an easy sport to officiate. There's a million things going on out there. And, obviously there's a fine line between what's a penalty and what's not. And obviously you also have to establish how you're going to call this game. Is it going to be tight? Is the arm going up for everything? Or are you going to let them play a little bit and you got to stick with it throughout the entire game? But, something else that I mentioned too, again, the Rangers being the more disciplined team. There was a situation later in this game where Goodrow was called for a penalty. You've got Miller and Nason tangling behind the net. They had already called Goodrow for a cross check, but then they got Nason for a high stick. So again, the Canes taking away their own power play chance. And then the big one here, the one involving Guentzel. So Igor covers the puck. Guentzel gets knocked down to the ice by Goodrow during a scrum in front of the Ranger net. You've got Fox yelling at Guentzel. Guentzel then, it looked like he kind of shot the puck toward the net. And again, ESPN's camera work, just their entire production is just god-awful. You miss so much because they don't know what camera to use and who to look at. But it looked like Guentzel shot the puck toward the net, and Ranger players are not going to like that at all. And then Guentzel basically throws a punch at Fox. This was caught by the cameras, but just seconds before they went to a replay. And then they missed all of this, by the way. We had to watch all of this next stuff on replay after it had happened. You can hear the crowd reacting, but nobody in the ESPN production truck is reacting because they're not very good at their jobs. And finally, we get a replay, and you see where Fox, took a swipe at Guentzel. So that was in retaliation to the punch that Gensel had thrown just before that. And then Gensel basically throws a haymaker, punches Fox in the face, knocks him to the ice. And there's actually some history between those two. There was a situation in game one 2 years ago between the Rangers and Penguins where Gensel basically sucker punched Fox in the back of the head. And it seems like those two don't like each other. And obviously, there's no love lost between the Rangers and Penguins. Not like the Rangers forgot about this guy. But one more question I'll throw out for you guys. I know Gensel's a great player. I know he's a big-time playoff performer. You guys really want this guy on the New York Rangers? I mean, it's always something like this. And I think he takes after his former captain over there. But yeah, like I said, a lot going on in this game. And I almost feel like this is part one of a two-parter here. We've kind of gone overtime already, and there's some other things from this game that I definitely want to talk about in our next episode. We'll also look ahead to game 3. Definitely looking forward to doing that. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, there's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.